So welcome everybody. Thanks for coming out today to Inside Effective Coaching, brought to you by Carrier's Edge, North America's leading provider of online training developed exclusively for the trucking industry. My name's Mike Miller. I'm the Director of Marketing here at Carrier's Edge. Just before we get started, a couple of quick housekeeping items. We are recording this session, so you will get an email link later in the week with the recording. And if you're not here, you're not hearing this, but even if you don't attend, you're going to get that recording link. So, and for questions today, we will take questions. If you have questions, there's a Q&A function within Zoom there. You can drop your questions into there, and we'll be watching those and dealing with them as they come in. So let me just stop sharing this screen here. So we've got a great topic for you today. I'm super excited about this. I'm joined today by one of the winners of the 2026 Best Fleets to Drive For program to talk about effective coaching and what they're doing with their coaching and their safety program in their organization. Before I introduce them, though, I want to take just a minute and briefly explain what the Best Fleets program is all about for those of you who don't know, because there may be some of you who are unaware on the session. So Best Fleets to Drive For is a program that's now heading into its 19th year, measuring for-hire carriers providing the best workplace experience for their drivers. So it's totally free to participate. It takes one nomination from a single driver to be eligible. Those who do choose to participate go through a rigorous process that includes a detailed questionnaire. There's in-depth interviews with the Carrier's Edge team. We collect driver surveys. I think we had 4,500-ish driver surveys in the last round of this that we did, which is a pretty astounding number. From all of that, the Carrier's Edge team reviews and scores participating fleets across 7 categories to arrive at a list of the top 20 fleets each year. And these are what we announce as the best fleets to drive for. So it's a hard list to get on. It's a lot of competition. And those fleets who do get on are demonstrating some real impressive innovation in what they're doing. So joining me today for a webinar is Ryan Johnson. And Ryan is the Director of Safety at Halvor Lines. Halvor has about 575 company drivers and 80-ish owner-operators across 6 terminals, and they're headquartered in Superior, Wisconsin. So Halvor's been a top 20 winner now 14 times and has been in the Hall of Fame for 5 years. So to get recognized in the Hall of Fame, a fleet has to be a top 20 winner for 10 consecutive years or 7 years with the best overall win. So it's truly an impressive feat. And Ryan's been with Halvor for 10 years now, in his current role for 6, I believe, if I'm remembering that number properly, Ryan. So
Yeah.
welcome and thanks for joining us.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. Really, really excited to dig in and talk about coaching and some other stuff today. So in this year's Best Fleets program, as in every year, we tracked a number of questions about coaching and about mentoring programs, touching on things like, how fleets talk about performance, how they're using benchmarking, who does the coaching, how you choose the coaching, and it's how you support those coaches. Over the years, we've seen a shift in how fleets are handling coaching. I mean, it's moved from something very informal to becoming something that's more structured and more rigorous with a lot of fleets. If I look at the 2026 results, half of the fleets have some sort of structured coaching or mentoring program in place, meaning that, they're putting dedicated resources to this, and coaching is being done very intentionally. Another 38% of those, again, coming back to the numbers, are doing some proactive outreach to drivers as part of the coaching program. There's a lot more that I'm going to touch on it as we go, but I want to start today, Ryan, sort of where the driver starts, and that's with onboarding. And this might not be necessarily coaching per se, but it's really where a fleet is setting up that new driver for success and setting those expectations that you'll be holding them accountable for later. And I know from our best fleets data, just under half of fleets right now are getting started early in that process. They're sending new drivers paperwork and training ahead of orientation. We're seeing about 60% of fleets have incorporated a virtual component into their orientation, and half of them are also having members of the executive team involved in welcoming new drivers. So there's a lot of interesting things happening in what fleets are doing. I'd love to hear, so what happens when a new driver joins Halvor? What are you guys doing to set them up?
Yeah, it's a good question. COVID kind of changed a lot of the rules that we know. We were nervous when it came out. Like we have a lot of content we have to do. Um, and it really forced a lot of us to do what you're talking about, virtual or doing things ahead of time. So, we've actually been able to cut, we didn't shorten orientation since it's come back on site, but we do a lot of stuff beforehand. And it really starts with recruiting. One of the big things that we believe in is, making sure we're trying to give drivers accurate information. There's a lot of companies reaching out to them. So, we start with obviously the normal recruitment process, making sure that we're both a good fit for each other. But then we have, an interview sheet that gets filled out. And, here is what we've talked about. Here's the expectations I have. Here's what that company has. And based on the experience level, what I mean by that, if it's a brand new student,
Mhm.
we have an extra process where we'll reach out to them specifically before they get here to talk about lifestyle. A lot of people are great on paper. They're really good about, they go to really top-notch training programs and they can do the job, but make sure that they understand the lifestyle that they're getting into. There's a lot of driving jobs. We're primarily over the
Yeah.
road. So one of the areas we see a lot of people come in and we have early turnover is because they're like, I didn't understand this lifestyle. So we try to get them with people that have been in that lifestyle and make sure that they understand the commitment they're making, their family's making before they get here. But, once they get here, we like to sit down. One of the first things to do is go back over that interview sheet with someone outside of recruiting and just say, hey, here's what you had said. I just want to make sure this is the expectation you still have for yourself or have out of Halvor Lines and make sure that right away we're on the right foot. And if there's little discrepancies, we'll go ahead and talk about those and just make sure, before we invest any more time for either party that, we are the right fit. And we never really have to
Yeah.
send anyone home. Sometimes you'll have a difference of like, well, what do you mean by Northeast? And just make sure we fully understand where you're willing to run. Um, but we kind of use the model. We've always talked about the white glove service for orientation. It's our first shot to make the first impression, and you only get one.
Yeah.
So that started with selecting who's going to run our orientation. We cover a lot of data, even though we have people from other departments that come in. It needed to be someone that knows Halvor Lines, knows our culture and how we want to treat drivers, but knows a little bit about every department because they get a lot of questions in there that they can't always run to that department head and try to get the
Uh-huh.
answer. So
Yep.
it really started with making sure it's not an entry level person. We put in a person that has extensive knowledge with Halvor Lines and is comfortable with how we operate. And I think that definitely has had paid dividends for us in the long run.
That's interesting. So you've got that experienced person running the orientation. Is like, are they doing the whole thing? Are there other people involved that are coming in and out of the process as you go through it?
Yep. So it's a combination of both.
Okay.
So it's a person that they're kind of the facilitator. Day one is a lot just with that person. And then when we get into safety, accounting, how you're going to get paid, how you're going to get routed. We do bring in people from each department. Um, we also do like defensive driving, the Smith system. So we had this person that, but we have 8 people that can technically do it, but we made sure the person that runs orientation can teach the Smith system, and
Okay.
can do all aspects of orientation so that it's just a seamless process and can answer pretty much any question that could come up. But yeah, we like to get, executive team members and members from each department to come in and you're giving them a lot of information, so
Yeah.
it's really good to kind of here's the person, here's their number. We give them like we actually send them a text with all the phone numbers of like who we need to call, but by no means can you remember all this information in about a 3.5, 4 day orientation.
Yeah. Oh, it is so much to remember. And I think if I remember correctly, when we were talking last week, you guys do as part of your orientation, you're doing a full day on defensive driving. Is that right? You told me that?
We do. Yep. Yep. We've
Yeah.
committed, we believe in the Smith system. So we do a full day, the classroom portion, and then you get out and do the drives. And that's kind of part of our ongoing safety. It starts on day one. This is kind of what our expectation is on what defensive driving is, and we'll coach on this based on camera scores. But every year we have a component of the Smith system, including continuing to get recertified in the full program.
Okay, interesting. And so now maybe like let's contrast or compare that a little bit sort of to what happens on an ongoing basis. I mean, one of the interesting stats that came out of the Best Fleets program, or a couple of them. So we're finding that that all carriers right now they're using cameras and they're doing some coaching based on events, and that can tend to be a reactive and a corrective approach, and that coaching needs to be done, but it's not the full coaching picture. And we're also seeing an increasing number of fleets that are making ongoing proactive outreach and coaching part of their culture. Looking at the what you guys are doing at Halvor Lines, I'm curious, like what does your coaching program look like in terms of, who's getting the coaching, who does the coaching, and how you delivering it?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's a good point. I think coaching has gone on for years, but I think once you
Yeah.
got cameras, I think that really escalated it where that we really have to coach on these items. If you're in an accident, you have to show that you're trying to defend them. But we've pushed it to like fuel now. Fuel is such an important number for us. We have a department that's assigned to just fuel tasks. So we have departments that reach out on numbers on, do you understand how to read your fuel routing?
Mhm.
Why didn't we go to this fuel stop? So trying to be 100% compliant within our network is something we've put a lot of focus on. Idle time, trying to, that's a touchy subject though, because, you're putting drivers in warm weather. We want you to be comfortable, but how do we work together to shut the truck off as much as possible? Not just from the cost of idling, but like what it can do for your after treatment. It can really cause more maintenance
Mhm.
costs.
Mhm.
And then another one that we've really put focus on is def management. We've put def at all the terminals and trying to make sure that we get the message out and like fill up at the terminal. There's huge cost savings in
Mhm.
your def if you're not buying it on the roadway. So we try to get the bulk of the coaching, I would say, is done by driver managers. The
Okay.
exception to that would be they really help with fuel on routing, but when it gets into specific questions, we get them to the experts in the fuel department. Um, Same with safety related events. To have a culture of safety, everyone has to believe in like you have to do things that's right, and the driver managers tend to have a really good relationship with their drivers. Um, so we do ask them to do a bulk of the coaching. However, there are times when they'll come or it's a serious event, or they're like, I'm just not getting through to this person. Sometimes a member of safety or like the head of operations. Usually we do it in combination, bring them in person and just kind of say, hey, this is serious. But kind of we talk about, always try to find something positive. Like you got to have something positive to make sure that they come out of that coaching session with. It can't just be
Yeah.
you're speeding too much, quit speeding, and like that's not going to work. We got to figure out why we're speeding and what we can do to make you as safe as possible, and kind of what makes that person tick. And every person is definitely different. Um, but that's where I found to be most effective is getting to know the person,
Yeah.
understanding who they are, and then you can get into like, hey man, this is why we need to change this. We just want you to get home to your family, and it usually has better results doing it that way.
Yeah, that's interesting. You talk about getting to know the person so that you can relate to them. Does that um play a factor at all in terms of how you decide who's going to coach which drivers, or is it more location based? How do you sort of figure out that assignment?
It can, I mean, based on what you're coaching on,
Mhm.
again, a lot of times we like it to be the driver manager, unless there's like, I've talked to him two or three times on this. Sometimes though, we will do like we have group, I'll get into it later. It's kind of on our feedback, but we have like retention meetings, and sometimes
Mhm.
a name will come up and being like, great driver, here's an issue we have. And in that group, someone will be like, I have a really good relationship with that driver. So sometimes it's, bringing their name up in large settings and being like, who likes or who gets along with this person really well, and can you have a conversation with them? Sometimes it's based on that. It is sometimes based on location. We have
Yeah.
6 locations. We are over the road, but we do have some dedicated where they might only be in our Florida area and go to our Florida terminal. It's not ideal. We'd like to get them to Superior, but it doesn't make sense to go out a network to get them all the way up there. So sometimes it will be based on just where they run and where we can get them to the quickest. We prefer always as much in person as possible, but
Mhm.
based on the nature, that doesn't always
Yeah.
happen. And it's based on severity. If it's a few minor incidents, we can probably show them the video on their tablet and watch it. But if it's like a near miss, like we need to probably get in and sit in person across from the table and just try to understand what happened. It's going to be more effective.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. And it is, I mean, I know you got a lot of logistical things that you've got to sort out in terms of how who does the coaching and where they are, but it's 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 interesting and it's great to see that a piece of it is who can connect and well with
Mhm.
that driver and do that. We're going to talk a little bit later about um, you know the the fact that not everybody's a great coach and how you sort of do that too. But um, you touched on something there as you were talking about terms of, some recurring issues and things that come up. And that was I had a question come in before the webinar and we asked people what they wanted to hear us talk about is how do you approach a driver who needs continual coaching and doesn't seem to be making the improvements? Do you have a process or a strategy for dealing with that and figuring out why you're not getting through to them?
Yeah, yes and no. I'll just use speed. I'm sure a lot of people on
Yeah,
this call are they're trying to manage their speed. So I would say that's probably our biggest hurdle is usually the
yeah,
speed. So usually it starts with like awareness. It's not fair if someone's been speeding and then all of a sudden you just come in and say, "Well, you speed too much. This isn't working." So right away, trying to be like,
mm,
"Hey," and we use our camera system. That's where we get most of our speeding events. So every week we kind of have number like you get an AI score. We look at our lower performers, and that's who we need to deal with. And it starts with, hey, let's start with a coaching session, just a general coaching session. Show them the alerts, its speed. It might be a fall new distance, it might be a hard break, running a stop sign. But um, so we start there. If they're on there a couple of weeks, like 2 weeks in a row, we usually will then escalate it, and we'll bring them in and say we're going to put you on an improvement plan.
mm,
We really trying to get through to them. Like we really want you to be safe out there. Like it's important for us for you to get home, and so we put them on like a 4-week coaching plan where we don't expect perfection. That's not
mm,
fair, but it's like we want to see you make improvements up to our goal um, that we have for the fleet. But let's just work on continuous improvement, be better the next week than you were the week prior. Um, that usually works. However, after 4 weeks, we have had
mm,
some people that just really don't want to change. So then it's a little bit more
yeah,
serious conversation coming in and trying to figure out, why can't we've actually increased our speed recently. So like we've listened to you, we've given
mm,
you more speed if you use the cruise control. Like we're trying to listen to you. We just need you to try to um, listen to us and just go the speed limit. It's our number one CSA violation. It's our number one violation in our camera system. On the rare occasion, if the improvement plan doesn't work that's documented, we would move to a corrective action.
yeah,
It's like, hey, this is kind of a serious written warning. If you're not going to change, unfortunately, we may not be the right fit for each other, and that's okay. It's not the route we want, but you got to be comfortable with if it's not right for you, are you gonna try to defend this? And sometimes you get to that point where it's like, I don't know if I can continue to defend this. But we try to make it clear early on, like our desired outcome is never to not have you as a driver
mm,
here, it's to change your behavior. But there is a possible outcome if we can't figure out how to improve this, that we may not be the right fit for each other. And I, honestly, we'll never we've gotten to corrective action phase before.
yeah,
Usually that's enough for they're like, okay, I need to change. But then you got to remember they'll change it for a week or two. You got to continue to look at them every 2 or 3 weeks because they'll trickle back. But I think
yeah,
a lot of it just comes back to how you treat people. One thing we hear a lot is like, you guys just treat us really well. And usually, if you're trying to have a relationship, treating them as a human being, they're not a truck number. if especially if they have experience, they've had the outcome where they're like, I'm just truck 4444. A lot of them want to change because they're like, I really like the atmosphere and working for you. So I would say figure out the culture piece because if you treat them well, you can usually get the drivers to want to see it the way you want them to see it.
Yeah, and I think what you've said there is so so important too, that um that that relationship and that culture and feeling heard, because it's not a one-way sort of communication for coaching to be effective. It needs to be that two-way, and we're going to chat about driver feedback in a little bit, but I think that was something really important that you said there that I just wanted to pull out.
Well, I think
That's
it's
great.
important too in some of these coaching sessions. Like I'm safety, so I have the tendency
Yeah.
to be like, why did you do this? You shouldn't do this. But like when you watch a video together and listen to them talk to you about it, you can be like, okay, like I understand why you did that. And then a lot of times you come back and be like, do you think we could have done something a little differently? And they'll say, yeah, I probably could have had more distance or something. And a lot of times they'll come to that conclusion. And I can see why you see it that way. In my mind, I just think like you should have 10 seconds and have no one around you, but that's not realistic. So you get a lot out of that. And when you let them talk and you say, I understand it from your perspective, and here's how I see it, that's where I really have had some of the best coaching sessions. Like, we use a score of 0 to 1,000, 1,000 being good from our Netrunning camera system. And I remember I had one that was like 600, and we had like an hour long talk, and most of it was about getting to know him. Then we
Mhm.
got into, hey, here's some of the alerts we need to talk about. And then he went from like 600 up to like 1,000 in like a week. And we used to call every week. And he said it was just because you treated me like a human being and got to try to get to know me. It wasn't just calling me saying slow down and then hanging up. So that's kind of where I talk about. That was probably my biggest success story. But getting to know the person this happened a few times for me that way.
Yeah, that relationship can mean everything when you're doing it. So you touched a little bit on this and in some of the different coaching sessions and types of coaching sessions you have when you're talking earlier. Does it differ at all? So on the how am I trying to phrase this? So when you're not talking to somebody about a corrective action or something that you're hoping that you can change about them, is that a different kind of a coaching session? Does your approach change? Do you have separate focuses to sort of, reinforce the positive stuff?
Yeah, that's a big feature that we talk about. So when we have an expectation for the driver managers to at least do so many coaching sessions a week, a month, which gets them through their small fleet. We can turn over the fleet and make sure we talk to everyone in about a month and a half if only they were talking to them. But every week we're like, make sure you're talking to your you know your top performers too. So like we get alerts to what our
Mm.
system calls star events, which are good
Okay.
moments. So we make sure to call them out, call them up. Especially the big ones I like doing is when we get road observations. We probably all heard it. You're like, hey, I got an observation on your driver, and it's actually a positive one. I'm not calling to make a complaint on your driver. So, we make sure to call the driver manager, and make sure they know, like, hey, this person gave you some kudos. I think those are the best ones.
Yeah.
I think the drivers like those the most, and we in safety like those the most too. So.
Awesome. Yeah, no, that's great. I'll just take a quick second here just to remind everybody, if you do have any questions as we're going along, drop those into the Q&A, and we'll get to them as we go through here. I did want to ask or talk a little bit about ad performance reviews.
Yeah.
So when again coming back to some of our best fleets data, we're seeing that when we think about formal performance reviews, about 38% of fleets right now in the program are conducting annual reviews. Another 27% are doing it a little more frequently than that. At least about 35% of fleets, though, that are not doing it, or doing it less than that. I know that you guys are doing formal reviews with your drivers. Tell me, like, how do you manage that, and what's that process look like for you?
Yeah, yep. So we do an annual review based on like their anniversary month. It doesn't have to be right on the
Okay.
date, but that's kind of how we look at it. We have turned it over to human resources to manage the
Mm.
process. Um, So we have a standardized form. The first of each month, it goes out to the safety and the driver managers and says, hey, here's the reviews that you need to do this month. Ours is a two-part. So there's an operational component to it, and then we break it down to just safety. So a lot of times we try to, again, the most effective is on-site. So we have primarily at our Superior terminal and our Rosemont, Minnesota terminals where we can do them, but we try to bring them on site. A lot of the numbers aren't shocking though, because we have driver scorecards. A lot of what we're talking about are their KPIs. They get like a weekly or monthly email. They can get it however they want that tells them how they're doing in a lot of these areas. So a lot of our conversation isn't that shocking. A lot of this stuff has happened along the way. If we had a service failure, we've talked about it. If we had a preventable incident, we've already talked about it and turned it over to training to do some training on it. So it's kind of just a reason for them to come in and talk. But one of the cool parts is a lot of it has focused shifted to like where do you want to go? Um,
Mm.
Meaning like career development. That's why I think HR is kind of passionate about it. We do you want to drive truck and be an overload driver? Do you want to become a trainer? Do you want to become a CDL instructor? We used to have our own program at Halvor Lines to train people. The company, it branched off its own company, but there's still opportunities there. A lot of times you figure out like, oh, I'd love to get in to be a dispatcher or work in logistics. So I think it's a good time to just talk to your drivers again, get to know them. It's not the pressure of being under a load or we're sitting here talking about an incident. It's just talking, getting to know you as a human being. But I think one of the cooler parts is like, what do you want to do? Like, I didn't know you wanted to become a part of the safety team. So when you have
Yeah.
openings, you can go back and be like, hey, remember this, Johnny said he wanted to be. So we've actually pulled people from driving positions and got them into non-driving positions because of things they said on their performance reviews.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, that's very cool. And one thing you said there, I just want to pull out too. It's that nothing's a surprise, or shouldn't be a surprise in that conversation, because that's so important. Because if what you say in that performance review is something that they've never ever heard before, then something's broken down in your
Yeah.
process before that, so that it's not that surprise. I mean, that's such an important thing to focus on. I just wanted to make sure we called that out, that you guys are doing that, because I think that's fantastic. I mean, and then speaking of conversation, I mean, so and coaching and all of this is a conversation. It's two-way.
Mhm.
In the spirit of that, I want to touch on driver feedback for a minute. So everybody's collecting driver feedback, pretty much. I'll say everybody. I think everybody's collecting driver feedback now. We look at our in our best fleets results in the last year, like 40% said they're using multiple methods to collect that feedback. Three-quarters of them are doing some form of a driver survey. Surveys seem to be really big in terms of getting driver feedback. One of the interesting things we saw in the driver surveys was clear signs of survey fatigue. So drivers getting a little bit tired of doing surveys over and over again, getting a little bit suspect about whether anything's being done with the information. You guys scored very, very well in this question, so I'd love to sort of um, unpack. How do you? Two questions really. I mean, I want to know about what you guys are doing and how you do it, but I'd love to know, how do you balance the need for driver feedback and for that information with the risk of burning them out and survey fatigue and not getting good information because you're just asking them too much.
Yeah, we've definitely learned that the hard way. We used to do surveys after surveys and um two things there. You do it so much, sometimes it's like, is the data I'm getting even good, or are they just trying to say it to get off of the survey? But then acting on it, a lot of the decisions we make, for like again, I mentioned earlier we increased our speed. Well, a lot of that came from driver surveys. Me from the safety perspective is like, I don't know if I necessarily want to increase speed, but it was important to our drivers. So showing that we are taking your feedback seriously and acting on it is probably the best way to do it. But we have had to tailor back how we do our surveys. We do one right after orientation, basically based on how was our orientation, and then we try to do one in about a month. For about the first 90 days, we try to get about three of them done in that time frame, just more of like any questions you have. Do you understand how to, the first early on, it's really the dispatch is the big thing. So much information comes through that tablet. So we really try to make sure they understand how the tablet works. One thing we went to was verbal dispatch, like especially early on, is every driver when they get a dispatch needs to be called. It's not a text message. It's not a send it to the tablet and hope. Like they need to be called, talk to about, do you understand where you're picking up? Do you understand how to read
Mhm.
like this is an open window pickup or delivery, or this is an appointment delivery? Because again, you do it in orientation, but there's so much information. So being able to get them out of it and walk them through, like, do you understand what this tablet's trying to see? You see that comment section? That's going to give you special instructions, like you can't sleep at the customer, or you can sleep at the customer, or don't enter off of this road because it's a restricted road. Well, we put all that information in there and just expect the driver's going to be able to find it. And it's like, that's not fair to them. So that's where a lot of our verbal dispatch is, making sure they understand what that's saying to them. But I think the coolest thing about the driver feedback portion is we started what we call Dial the Driver program. The original intent was like we want to make our turnover better, and we need to understand, what drivers are telling us. And we used to score them 1 to 5, on 5 being they're not leaving us. A 0 or 1 is like I feel like there's a really high probability that this person's going to leave us. So when we first started it, and this is like the executive team to maintenance people to we even have logistics. These aren't the people that they're talking to every day.
Mhm.
It's people that they don't always get to talk to. So it's like if you have, again, you can call us at any time, any of us. Like here's my
Mhm.
name and number. Like you have like the owner calling you to, someone that works in the shop. Like we just want to talk to you and figure out, not in our department, but like what can we do better for you? So it originally started as just calling. We would go over every call
Yeah.
and talk about some of the issues we're seeing. We now talk, we've broken it out. We go over our retention over 13-week turnover by division, every reason someone left in the last week. And then we go over compensation. We look at like how much the average annual wage in that division was.
Mhm.
If one starts slipping, it's like, hey, do we need to look at our customers? Do we need to be looking at rate per mile? Like we know that if the rate starts slipping, it's probably going to be our biggest reason that drivers would start to leave. But one of the things we had to really do is that action piece. So if there's not just a all positive, like I love working here, I'm not going anywhere, because you get that too. But if
Yeah.
there's a problem, it gets assigned to someone. And every Tuesday we meet, and from that Tuesday till the next Tuesday, it gets assigned. And then there has to be a response to it, being like, Ryan Johnson, you were assigned this because it's in safety. And then I have to respond to the group saying, I spoke to this driver, the issue's been resolved. And I think that's probably been one of the more powerful things we've done. We've seen turnover come down, but we get a lot of talk about how like, oh, this is cool. Like, thanks for calling and just asking me how I'm doing. I don't always see that. So um, I would recommend that. You learn a lot from your drivers, especially if you're not calling for a safety. It's just like that's the first thing I say. I'm not calling to talk to you about safety. I'm just calling to see how you're doing and what we can be doing better, what you're seeing on the road, what should we be consider doing. We've made a lot of changes based off that feedback, and it's been positive.
That's great. And I think there's a couple of, well, there's many cool things, but there's a couple of really cool things about that. I mean, um, so we mentioned, like how do you show drivers or demonstrate that you're acting in your feedback. So the fact that you're making phone calls based on things that you're hearing or seeing is a pretty powerful sign that we're paying attention and we're not ignoring the things that you tell us. And I think that those phone calls that are not for something that they're in trouble about. Because one of the things
Yeah,
I I I we see a lot in the data. There's a lot of fleets is, and you have to do this. I understand it makes sense, but the phone calls and the outreach when there's some sort of a, like a heartbreaking event or something like that, like there or there's that's driven, and it kind of can train the driver to dread the phone call is what
yeah,
those calls can do. Where you've got something like this, where you're calling them for a positive reason, that kind of resets that, and it improves that relationship, and it makes them more open, I would think anyway, to having candid conversations with you. That's no,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah, some of
love
them
it.
are hour, like can be like 45 minutes an hour long. Some of them can be 5 minutes long, but some people want to talk and
Yeah,
it's always time well spent, in my
yeah.
eyes.
And so it's is there any sort of structured sort of script that people like would be working off of, or it's just like this is an issue to deal with, that's in your area of expertise, so make the call and have a conversation.
No, we actually try to get it out of. So to go back, for like the initial call, IT set up like here's our driver calls. It can tell like the last time they were called and it just randomly selects a driver, and you get a Monday morning email that says this week your driver call is this. You
Mhm.
can click on the link and you can go in and you can look at their scorecard and their phone number, how long they've been with you, did they come in as an experienced driver? It just gives you basic information. But our script on the initial call is really nothing. It's just really like it used to be like two questions, just like what could we do better, and how are you, and where the conversation goes. You'll have follow-up questions, or they might just start really
Yeah,
asking you a lot of questions, and that's a cool part because that's where a lot of the follow-up comes from. Is I don't just answer a question. If I don't know the answer, I'm not going to just say something. That's not my area, but do you mind if I have payroll reach out to you about that? Sure. Do you want them to call you? Sure. And then I'll call payroll and say, hey,
yeah,
please call this driver. And then they do it like almost right after the call. So I think we build trust with the drivers because we told them that we're going to have payroll call, and then they do end up calling. But that's where it gets more specialized. If they ask questions that's like specific to a department,
yeah,
that's when we kind of say, hey, you need to reach out to this person. They had a specific question. And a common one we find is like, I've been on, I'm out 2 weeks. I don't want to be
yeah,
out this long. And, well, we have like these special dedicated positions, and we'll have that person reach out and talk about openings. And, you find them
yeah,
an opening and they'll call back and be like, oh, thank you for having them call. I'm so happy. And, um, yeah, they're mostly
yeah,
positive. You do get some negative stuff, but
yeah,
it's been positive for sure.
yeah. No, it's great. I love that. Got a couple of questions that have come in here. One of them um, is interesting because it ties into some interesting stuff we saw in the best sleep stuff. So it's how do you deal with drivers with mental health issues? And this is something we saw in the data that um, it's a tricky one because not a lot of fleets right now, based on the data that we're seeing, are dealing with it or have special ways of dealing with that. And it seems to be a growing and a emerging issue or a is there anything that you guys are doing specifically around that? Do you have any programs or anything, or do how do coaches deal with those issues?
Yeah, yeah, I mean, I would say the most common, sometimes the driver manager can tell us something off with the driver. Sometimes they get told things. I think the biggest thing we've had it for a long time, is
Mhm.
the EAP program, Employee
Mm,
Assistance Program. We offer um, a free program that they can reach out to and talk to. They have so many sessions. It's anonymous, so like we don't see who it is. That's probably the biggest thing. And also it's just if you it's kind of like that you see something. I think the biggest thing is a lot of times the driver managers will say like something seems off with this driver, and some other people will be like, yeah, like he's been different. So just starting with a conversation, unfortunately, we've had to pull people off the road where like, I think in your best interest, you should get looked at and make sure you're okay. And I think the hard part is, I think drivers are so concerned about the income, if they have a family or not. So, we work closely with human resources to be like, you have short-term disability, understand you have coverage, you need to get looked at and get the help you need. Um, but yeah, I think that's the biggest two I could say is, HR deals more with it than safety. A lot of times we'll get it and then we'll refer it to human resources, but that employee assistance program and trying to understand that they have benefits that can help them, you need to take the time off to go see a specialist and get your head right. I would agree, especially since COVID for us, we've seen an increase in, mental health for sure.
yeah, yeah, it seems to be across everywhere. Definitely. I had a couple of questions, so I'm just gonna while we're looking at questions, clear out a few here. But a couple of questions that came in that I think take us back to where we started with talking about the onboarding stuff. Um, First one, and I'll put these together. What questions are you asking on your interview form? And the second one was, how long do you typically spend with a new driver when you're onboarding them? Do you incorporate ELD, load securement, and everything in that onboarding?
Yeah. So to start with, the questions they're kind of a wide array. Um, once we've made the offer, but like, where do you prefer to run? Where will you not run? Um, we ask questions like, do you have a pet? Do you want to bring a passenger? So they understand our policies and know that we're pet friendly passenger. We allow passengers. Um, what's your expectations in terms of like what you're making per week? We used to ask about miles, but now we're more like, what are you looking to make, and is this the right fit? They have incorporated questions on um, any expected home time. What is your home time
Yeah.
expectations? Any, travel coming up. I think at one point it does ask about um, referrals, and then we do ask questions on like safety. What's your stance on safety?
Mhm.
We make sure they understand like we do have crash mitigation systems. We do have camera systems. Like I want you to be aware that here's the cameras we use. We just try to make sure like when they come in, they're not surprised that we have cameras. They're not surprised that we have crash mitigation. We have now recently started buying trucks that have the Mirai system, and we make sure like you may have a truck with Mirai. Do you have any issues with that? And try to get ahead of those on the front side. Um, so the question about time spent in each department. So we have four divisions: general, dry van, refrigerated, a specialized division, which is like deck van for like
Mhm.
Polaris units, and then flatbed. So it's kind of based on your division. So the first 2 days, outside of your owner operator, it's a classroom, they're together, and then the third day is the Smith system. So the first 3 days they look similar no matter what division you're in. They do get about a half hour interview with HR to go over that interview sheet. So that's like a one-on-one session. We do our hair testing and our drug and alcohol testing here on site. So that's part of the orientation. But day four is specialized. So we have a full day of securement training if you're in flatbed. And then we make everyone that's not flatbed go through refrigerated and securement training on how to lock your loads, use or seal your loads, how to run a refrigerated unit, how to read a bill of lading, make sure, especially in
Mhm.
reefer, if it says 34 continuous, make sure if your load says something different than this, call. You need to call and tell us something's not right. So I would say day four is the day that's specialized to the division you're going in. So deck van, it's a lot of like driving off on ramps. So that's another, if you're in that division, a full day of how to set up the trailer, how to set up the ramps, how to drive the units off the trailer to deliver them to the customer. And
Great.
sometimes, especially in flatbed, we'll see it has to go till a second day. Just depends on how much experience they have with securement, and we want to make sure they're ready when they go out there.
Awesome. Oh, yeah, thanks. You got a shout out as opposed to a question here. Great job. Keep treating the drivers the way that they deserve to be treated. So I'll
Yeah,
pass that on
they're
to you.
they're why we're here. We have all the technology in the world, but at the end of the day,
Yeah.
it's a person behind the wheel, and we just got to connect with them, and it works out well.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. There's another one that's came in that you may or may not have insight in this, so I'll throw my 2 cents into it. But the challenge for a small carrier is not that we don't want to be available to our drivers. We do. The reality is that we have a very small office team managing HR, finance, dispatch, customers, compliance, general management, and managing 15 to 20 drivers. So how do you recommend a small carrier create meaningful driver communication and support without having someone dedicated solely to driver management? Um, I don't know if in your experience you've got, I mean, Halvor's, you've got counting owner operators over 600 drivers, so very, very different scenario. Any of your practices that you see translate into that smaller fleet scenario? I know when
Um,
I
I guess. Oh, go ahead. You can go.
Well, I was going to say, I know when we some of the information we see coming back in the best fleets data of what some of the smaller fleets are doing. I mean, there's a lot of utilizing other drivers, driver mentors, to help have some of those conversations and work with those drivers. Um, and you know, there's a myriad of communication channels that you can have. It's kind of picking one or two that you use consistently as opposed to inundating, I suppose, um, drivers with multiple channels so that they're never sure where something's coming from. Would be a couple of there's more, but there's a couple of things that I see coming out of the best fleets data. What were you going to say, Ryan?
Yeah. Yeah, I was gonna say that I mean the biggest thing 10 years ago, so when I started in March, we weren't 15 or 20, but we were probably less than half of what we were. We were under 300 trucks when I first started here. Um, so there was a lot of after hours. We didn't have as big of an after hours team. Like for safety, for instance, we worked, till about 5 o'clock, and then we would take the phones after hours. And you can get the burnout doing that. So I think the one thing we learned is just we do like lunch and learns or trying to cross train, try to
Mhm.
get as many people. They can't be subject matter experts, but like if you
Mhm.
have a crew that like for even today, like we have a few people that work overnight. We don't have a huge overnight staff, even at over 600 trucks. We have like maybe 3 people to 4 people that work overnights, and that there's someone in breakdown, and then we try to cross train people. So instead of transferring someone, like if someone calls in operations about an hours of service question, yes, they can get tricky and they can transfer them to safety, but every time you transfer the driver, they could be on hold, they could get frustrated. So
Mhm.
we do like lunch and learns and try to teach other departments as much as we can about the division. If it's an accident, I'm not going to expect a dispatcher to be able to handle that, but like we do try to tell them like you should be able to answer hours of service questions. Like you should know the hours as well as they do. I mean, if we're dispatching them. So I think that's the one thing if I was smaller is, you're going to burn yourself out if you're taking after hours calls. So hopefully you can get to like people share the after hours,
Mhm.
calls and things, but trying to train people on like the most relevant parts of your job, like for safety, I think that was the big thing. Like most of our calls are hours of service or overweight questions after hours. And it's like if we can train people how to answer those questions, they don't have to call and wake someone up. Obviously an accident's a different story, but I think that would be the
Yeah,
biggest thing is, trying to cross train people so everyone feels like they can help the driver. At the end of the day, it's, the driver just wants someone to listen to him and, try to help them out. And that would probably be the biggest thing if we were smaller, would continue to cross
yeah.
train people.
Yeah, no, great insights. Thanks. I wanna talk for a bit as we're about 11 minutes away from the top of the hour. So, but coach selection and support. I mean, we talked a little bit before. Not everyone's going to make a great coach. A great driver, a great
Hmm.
trainer might be a lousy coach, even though they're really good at their core job. It's a skill, like so many other things, right? So what we saw in some of the best fleets data, 35% of fleets right now have in the program have a formal selection program process for their coaches and mentors, and they're also providing ongoing training and support. I know you guys are doing some interesting things here. So who how are you choosing the people that are doing the coaching for you, and what kind of support do they have for that part of the role?
Sure. Yeah. So, when we first, especially on cameras, I'll start with camera. When we first got installed cameras, implemented cameras, we thought we were going to have it all housed within safety, and we were going to get a person that worked in our safety team that used to be a driver to do all the coaching. As we grew, that was not realistic. So when it comes to like camera coaching, when we hire driver managers, we make it clear that a big part of your job is going to be coaching the drivers. You're right, though. They're not everyone. Even if I go back and listen to my first coaching session, it probably wasn't very good. So, um, it's a skill that's learned. One thing I know we talked about in our prep for this is, Netrodyne, AI is a pretty cool tool now. That was one of the things that not just us, other people have gone to Netrodyne and said, look, we need help with like help on coaching. So I know when you put like if you get a driver, it can pull up like their alerts and things like that. It'll actually give you like AI suggestions of like how to coach this topic. Not all of them are great, but it's kind of a starting point. I would if you look into AI tools or even talk to your camera provider. I think a lot of them are starting to get those. It kind of said like based on what we see over the last week, like these are the areas that I would focus on, and it'll even give you suggestions on like how to talk about that topic. Um, Listening, don't just say, "Hey, start coaching." We have them sit with other experienced driver managers or our coaching analyst, the gentleman that we thought was going to be able to coach everyone. Listen to him and how he coaches. Um, we do lunch and learns. We've actually brought in we like prior HR does it, but I can't remember the first name, but like conflict resolution. We've done like sessions where we have people that come in and do like hour-long trainings. It's part of our lunch and learn, but it's a professional about how to like do conflict resolution and how to coach and its effectiveness. We like to do that every about a year with newer coaches. So at the end of the day, I just let them know like, hey, if you're struggling, just me or someone on our safety team can also sit with you and um, just give you feedback. Not every coaching session's the best one, but as they hear more and more of them, they just get more comfortable. And I think you got to be authentic too. Like I remember when I took over my job from my previous boss, I tried to do things the way he did and how he coached. And I'm like, that's just not who I am. Like I got to find my style and be myself, and I've become more effective doing that too.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And you guys, so I think if I'm remembering correctly too, you guys are doing, and maybe this is what you're talking about, about the sessions you do annually. You do like these half day workshops where you're teaching different skills around, could be coaching related, could be communication skills, could be things on like personality types and how to deal with them differently. Is that,
Correct. Yeah, I think it's called,
yeah.
is it Ted Pryor? There's like prior trainings. We've done that. We do a lot of, we
Okay.
believe too in like the Dale Carnegie. We like to
Oh,
put
okay. Yeah.
new people through the Dale Carnegie, win people into thinking your way. I can't remember the exact term, but it's been a while
Yeah.
since I've done it. But yeah, we try to get big groups together and bring in professionals in those topics, and we call them lunch and learns too. They could be a 1 to 2 hour session, and we buy them lunch, and they come in and we'll do trainings on coaching or um, safety does a lot of them, but HR does some
Yeah.
as well. So
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Thanks. Um, Wanted to touch briefly on coaches' compensation. So
yep.
um, I think it's somewhere like it's high, somewhere around 80% of the program, the fleets in the best fleets program are are have some sort of paid trainer or mentor program in place, but it varies widely. It could be things from like a gift card up to a set amount of cash per day kind of thing. So it's a little bit all over the map. But I'd love to know, and if you guys, I think you told me that you guys are no longer doing this, but sort of, why or why not you might be compensating people specifically for coaching.
Sure. Yep. So when we first made the switch to driver managers, we're going to take on a bulk of
Yep.
the coaching, and this is primarily based on the camera coaching, because we coach on like on-time delivery and things like that.
Okay.
When I look at it from the camera perspective, there was certainly pushback where operations, felt like that was safety's task. And we're like, a lot of the guidance we were getting from lawyers was like, it's really better coming from the driver manager. They're their manager.
Mm,
Safety's there to support them. So in order to help bridge and get them on board with training, we did have a component of like their quarterly bonuses that was tied to coaching. And really it was in order to be eligible for the bonus, you're going to have to do set number of coaching sessions.
mm,
We did that for about 2 years, and our belief is that in your job description, part of it is coaching your drivers. So we've kind of got to the point of, this is just your expectation. If you're
mm,
going to be in a driver manager role and manage these drivers, your expectation now is that you're going to coach them. And had we just rolled that out, it maybe wouldn't have been effective, but like over time they've done it. We paid, compensated them for it, and we got to the point where we're like, now this is just the expectation of this job is going to be coaching. And we get some pushback, but not really too much. I think a lot of them are positive. We think coaching and everyone thinks it's just this negative thing, and a lot of them get to talk to their drivers about, yeah, you had a heartbreaking event, but man, you're doing a lot of good things too. Like, look at how great your scores improved. Or I saw you have a star event because you moved over for a law enforcement officer. So, that's really where coaching's been is like focus on good things as well and end it on a positive note. Get to the point where we need to change this behavior, but you're doing really well in these areas. And that's where the scorecard helps too, because it could be like you're doing really well in miles and you're doing really well on no accidents and your green zone score overall is good and your idle time's great. And just tell them all the good things they're doing as well, not just
Yeah.
the bad stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, that's awesome. Makes sense. So kind of I'm gonna a couple more questions that have popped up in here that are one of them is pretty straightforward. So you mentioned something called a near-eyed system. Did somebody uh,
Mirai.
near-eye?
Mirai. So they're the cameras. They're like, you have the kind of on your A pillar, you have the screens. It's kind of replaces your rear view mirrors.
Ah, okay.
Some
Okay.
drivers, new drivers love it. Experienced drivers tend to
Yeah.
not like it as much at first. But one thing
Yep.
that I would say is a positive about them is in nighttime conditions and like rainy conditions, it's like crystal clear and you can see they have like ones that look right at your blind spot and look down the side of your trailers and it's kind of like night vision. Like at night, it kind of
Yeah.
lights it up. So you do get really good visibility. It's really helped with all the technology. Our number one of our bigger issues was side lane change side swipes and it's really helped. It's crystal clear on those. So
Very cool. Yeah, I've seen some demos of those. That's a neat technology. Um, and then the last question I've got in here is um, not really related to coaching here, but if you have any insights in this, are there specific training schools that you look for drivers to come from, or are there any that you would avoid because of their reputation? That's a
um
politically charged question because that's
yeah.
in the media a lot today, but
Sure. Well, it's actually a good point. The minister bars and they're doing a
yeah.
lot on schools right now. And I'll be the first to admit, Halvor Lines had a entry level driver training program, and they were quick. We just went through an audit for our entry level driver training program.
Hmm.
We were confident it went well, but when they called us, they're like, "We're coming in like you got 2 weeks to get this data," and they're really aggressively going after schools. So we've always worked with selective schools in certain hiring areas. So I don't know if I would tell you to avoid any schools. I would tell you to keep data. One of the ways that we have eliminated schools was from feedback from either our trainers or what our data is telling us. And what we're looking at data would be like we hire from the school and our turnover, they leave within 3 weeks every time from the school. We tracked that data. I mean, like we don't want to work with them anymore. Our driver trainers would be like every time they would say like I'm really struggling with this person comes in, they don't even know how to back up a trailer. And we don't expect them to be perfect, but they're like they
Yeah.
really struggle with backing up a trailer. Like, they're really, really like
Yeah.
more training than I could provide. So we've used that to figure out like what schools maybe are just kind of pencil whipping them or just trying to get them through. I couldn't. I would never probably even if I knew him. I don't know if I'd sit here and tell you. If you want to reach out to me after, I could probably get that list of schools. But that's how we eliminated them. Was just what our data told us, and we were losing trainers because they're like it takes too long to. I know I have to invest time in backing training, but some of these people are like they've never backed a trailer before. I don't even know how they're here. So
Yeah.
that's how we determined it.
Yeah. No, that's great. Thanks for weighing in on that. Yeah, it's crazy some of the stories I hear of fresh people coming out of some of the schools. But that's awesome. Well, thank you so much, Ryan, for being part of this today. Really, really appreciate it. This has been some fantastic information. It's some really great questions. I'm just gonna pop up our closing screen there. And thank you everybody else for coming online today and listening in and sharing some great questions. If you have any questions, there's contact information on the screen there, our email and our phone number. We will, as you said before, we will have a recording of this that will go out to everybody. And I believe Ryan gave the okay to when we send out that follow-up email to drop some of his contact information in there if anybody has specific questions for him coming out of this. But you can also send those to us if you got any questions that weren't answered. Thank you again. Last final plug for the Best Fleets program. Our nominations period opens up for that the day after Labor Day. So Tuesday, I believe that's the 11th or something like that of September. You can learn more about the program at bestfleetstodrivefor.com. Check it out. We have an official location for our annual education and awards conference that we run every spring. That's going to be April 5th and 6th in Kansas City. So check that out. Fantastic program of, sessions like this where we're talking to some of our best fleets winners and learning from them, learning from industry experts. Really, really great program. And again, you can learn more about that on the website, and there'll be some links to that information in follow-up emails. So thanks again, and thanks again, Ryan. Really appreciate your time today, and have an awesome rest of your week, everybody.
Thank you.